Welcome to today's deep dive. Have you ever found yourself standing over a potted plant, just, meticulously pulling a stubborn little weed from the soil, and then you pause?
Yeah, you wonder what would actually happen if you just let it be.
Right. You've got the root pinched between your fingers, you're ready to snap it out of the dirt, but for a split second, there's that hesitation.
It's uh it's actually a really common, almost universally shared instinct. We
Yeah.
have this deep-seated, basically involuntary reaction to pluck it.
Definitely.
You see this flash of unauthorized green, right,
Yeah.
where there should just be bare, controlled soil, and the human brain immediately registers an error. We want to correct the error and maintain order.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you bought the terracotta pot, you bought the specific soil blend.
The expensive soil.
Exactly. You paid for the main plant. So that tiny sprout is just a squatter. But even as you're pulling it, there is that fleeting curiosity, like, what am I actually destroying here?
Right, because it could just wither and die in 3 days, or, it could grow into something that completely takes over.
Because in that moment, you are looking at pure, unbridled biological potential. But we usually choose to kill it before it can reveal what it is.
We do, and we just kill the potential entirely.
Yes, which brings us perfectly to our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring that exact hesitation, but pushing it to its absolute logical extreme. We have a deeply philosophical, yet incredibly practical source today.
It's a really great one.
It really is. It's a blog post by an author named Ang, dated July 14th, 2026. And the title is Cultivating the Common, the Ornamental Potential of Balcony Weeds.
And the title alone, it signals a complete paradigm shift in how we think about horticulture, cultivating the common.
It's so provocative.
It is. It takes something we are culturally conditioned to despise, or at least ignore, the weed, and attempts to elevate it to the status of an intentional, curated, ornamental feature.
Right. But the thing that actually jumped out at me first wasn't even the title. It was the subtitle. Right at the top, it says, Notes on Gardening, Part 955.
955.
955. I mean, that is wild.
Which is a massive contextual clue for us. When an author labels something Part 955, we know we are dropping into a very specific type of mind.
Yeah, this isn't a casual weekend gardener writing down a few thoughts.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This is a rigorous longitudinal study. This is someone who has spent years tracking microscopic changes, the subtle shifts in seasons, the soil chemistry, watching plants live, thrive, and fail over a really long timeline.
It's an exercise in extreme prolonged attention. And our goal today is to unpack what happens when you apply that level of intense attention to something society deems completely worthless.
Exactly. And to understand how Ang plans to use these weeds, we first have to understand Ang's unique relationship with them.
Right, because Ang writes about having a quote-unquote tendency to collect weeds, especially those that flower, for evaluation and experimentation.
The psychology of the gardener is just as critical here as the botany, honestly.
But I want to push back on this a little bit, because a balcony is, by definition, premium limited real estate.
Oh, for sure.
So if you bring uninvited, misfit plants onto your balcony, specifically for evaluation, aren't you essentially running, like, a laboratory for lint?
A laboratory for lint. That's a funny way to put it.
I mean, if you are intentionally putting a weed in a pot and observing it, hasn't the plant inherently lost its status as a weed?
Botanically speaking, yes. Because the secret of the gardening world is that there's actually no scientific classification for a weed.
Wait, really? None at all?
None. You will not find a family of plants called weeds in any biology textbook anywhere.
So it's literally just a plant with a terrible PR team.
Exactly. The definition of a weed is purely spatial and human-centric. It is simply a plant growing in a location where we, in our desire for absolute environmental control, have decided it just shouldn't be.
It's out of alignment with our aesthetic agenda.
Precisely. But if you look at their actual ecological function, what we call weeds are usually ruderal species.
Rural. What does that mean in practice?
So ruderal species are nature's first responders. In the wild, when a piece of land is disturbed, maybe by a forest fire, a landslide, or even just a gardener turning over the soil.
Right, just digging with a trowel.
Yeah, that soil is wounded. It's suddenly exposed to harsh sun and wind erosion. Ruderal species are biologically programmed to be the very first to arrive on the scene.
Oh, interesting. So they're like the paramedics of the plant world.
That's a great analogy. Their seeds germinate incredibly fast in poor conditions, and their primary job is to rapidly cover the exposed dirt to lock in moisture and stabilize the ground.
Wow. So when we meticulously weed our garden beds to keep the dark soil looking pristine and bare, we are basically ripping the biological scab off a wound.
We are actively fighting the Earth's natural healing mechanism.
That's wild.
It is. And that's why Aing's approach of collecting them for evaluation requires an immense amount of psychological discipline.
Because you have to fight that urge.
Right. When that green shoot comes out of the soil, the human instinct is to immediately categorize it. Friend or foe, keep or destroy. Aing is hitting the pause button on that instinct.
Choosing to suspend judgment until the plant actually reveals its life cycle.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the specific real-time situation playing out on Aang's balcony right now.
Yeah, the two intruders.
Right. There are two distinct, fast-growing intruders that have become the subjects of this evaluation, and one of them is a complete mystery. Aang explicitly writes that it is rather hard to find a good match for it.
Which is pretty remarkable if you think about it. We have the entirety of human botanical knowledge, image recognition apps, and global databases right in our pockets.
Yeah, I can just snap a picture of a leaf and my phone tells me what it is in 2 seconds.
Exactly. So if you can't find a match for a plant today, you are dealing with a genuine unknown.
But the other sprout has been identified. Aang notes it is a type of chickweed, specifically calling out the scientific name ageratum-conyzoides.
Ageratum-conyzoides, yes.
So we have one known weed and one mystery weed. And again, I have to challenge the logic here because I looked up ageratum-conyzoides. We are not talking about some hidden majestic rose bush.
No, not at all. It's a very common broadleaf weed.
Yeah, it has these slightly fuzzy, oval-shaped leaves, and the flowers look like tiny, pale, purple or white fuzzy buttons. It's, fine.
Right.
But it definitely doesn't scream ornamental masterpiece. Most people pay good money for chemical herbicides specifically to eradicate this plant from their lawns. Why give it precious balcony space?
Well, if you judge ageratum-conyzoides by the standards of traditional specimen planting, it completely fails.
Okay, and specimen planting is what exactly?
It's when you take one plant, say a giant orchid or a massive hybrid hibiscus, and you place it center stage.
Ah, right, the showpiece.
Right. You want one massive, spectacular flower to draw the eye. Ageratum doesn't do that. It actually belongs to the Asteraceae family.
Okay.
Which means what looks like one fuzzy button flower is actually a capitulum.
A capitulum?
Yeah, it's a dense cluster of dozens of microscopic flowers packed together.
Oh, wow. So it's focusing on volume rather than size.
Exactly. Its evolutionary strategy is speed and volume, not isolated grandeur. It grows rapidly, often branching out to form dense mats across the soil.
To cover that wound you mentioned earlier.
Yes. And it produces hundreds of those tiny fuzzy buttons very quickly, just to ensure it drops as many seeds as possible before competing plants shade it out.
And Aang wants to capitalize on exactly that biological function. Because Aang isn't just watching these two plants grow for the fun of it, right? The post states that Aang is actively waiting for both the chickweed and the mystery sprout to bloom.
Right, specifically to harvest the seeds and propagate them later.
Which completely shifts the narrative from passive observation to active scientific experimentation.
It's a total shift.
Yeah.
Aang yields control to the chaotic, accidental nature of the wind or the bird that dropped the seed, but then plans to reclaim control by intentionally multiplying that chaos.
But wait, yielding control to an unknown plant on a small balcony feels genuinely reckless. I mean, if you don't know what that mystery sprout is, couldn't it develop a massive taproot that shatters the terracotta pot?
It absolutely could.
Or what if it's toxic? We buy seeds in packets specifically to mitigate that risk. We buy guaranteed outcomes.
We do. And that is exactly why traditional gardening can sometimes feel a bit sterile. Aang is accepting the risk of a shattered pot or a toxic leaf in exchange for the thrill of discovery.
So it's yielding to the unexpected.
Yeah. But the part of the plan that is truly demanding isn't just letting them grow, it's the seed harvesting.
Yes, let's talk about the mechanics of that, because harvesting seeds from a sunflower makes perfect sense to me. You have these massive visible seeds you can just pluck out.
Oh, very satisfying.
Super satisfying. But you just told me that ageratum flowers are microscopic clusters. How do you even harvest seeds from something that small?
It is painstaking, delicate work. Because ageratum is a ruderal pioneer plant, it relies on anemochory.
Anemochory? Which means?
Wind dispersal. It wants the wind to carry its seeds away the exact second they are ripe.
Oh, so it's a race against the wind?
Literally. You have to wait for those tiny fuzzy button flowers to dry out and turn into these fragile, papery seed heads.
Okay.
And inside are dozens of...
I am going to read Ng's central hypothesis directly from the text, because the phrasing is the core of this entire deep dive.
It's perfectly stated.
Yeah, Ng writes, quote, "As individual flowering plants, the chickweed may not be a showstopper, but what if we grow them in a cluster? Surely the abundance of flowers matches those of plants with more vibrant, larger petals."
Ang is drawing a direct contrast here between the showstopper, the specimen plant, and the concept of abundance through mass planting.
Right, and when I read that, my mind immediately went to pointillism in art.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Think about Georges Seurat's famous painting, A Sunday, on Le Grand Jatte. If you walk right up to that canvas until your nose is almost touching it, and you isolate one single dot of pale purple paint.
It's nothing.
Exactly, it's entirely unremarkable. It is not a showstopper.
Because the individual unit is not designed to carry the weight of the composition.
Right, the single dot is the single ageratum flower. But when you step back and you see 10,000 of those ordinary dots meticulously clustered together, the human eye blends them into a luminous, breathtaking texture.
It becomes a masterpiece.
Exactly. But does that same optical illusion apply to 3D landscaping?
It absolutely applies. And the visual mechanics of how it works in 3D space are fascinating.
Okay, walk me through it.
Well, when you plant one single chickweed in a pot, the human eye naturally focuses on the negative space. You see the gaps between the leaves, the scraggly stems, the smallness of the flower.
It looks disorganized. It looks like a weed.
Precisely. But if you take Ang's harvested seeds and you intentionally propagate hundreds of them tightly together.
Like a dense cluster.
Right. If you architect a dense cluster, the negative space vanishes. The stems disappear into a solid canopy.
Yeah.
You just get a continuous undulating blanket of those fuzzy purple buttons.
So the texture becomes the focal point rather than the individual bloom.
Yes. And it interacts with light completely differently than a large petal does. A massive cluster of tiny flowers creates hundreds of microshadows and highlights.
Oh, I didn't even think about the lighting.
It generates a visual depth and a structural complexity that a single, large, flat petal simply cannot replicate. Ang is arguing that if you scale up the ordinary, the collective texture visually equals or even surpasses the impact of a rare ornamental.
But if that is botanically and visually true, why isn't this the standard? I mean, if a cluster of weeds looks just as stunning as a rare ornamental, why do we spend fortunes at exotic nurseries?
Because we are culturally conditioned to link aesthetic value with rarity and financial cost.
Oh, for sure.
A rare variegated monstera or a genetically engineered hybrid rose has prestige. It proves you have resources.
And a chickweed does not. It basically proves you have dirt.
Right. Furthermore, executing a dense cluster of weeds effectively requires serious design intent.
How do you mean? Like, what's the difference between a designed cluster and just an overgrown, neglected pot?
Boundaries. Yeah, if a weed just spreads wildly across a lawn, it reads visually as neglect. But if that exact same dense cluster of weeds is tightly confined within the stark, clean geometry of a beautifully glazed ceramic pot.
The container provides the context.
Exactly. It tells the viewer, this is a deliberate choice. It elevates the wildness into art.
It really takes away the excuse that you need a huge budget to create a beautiful space. I mean, the materials for a stunning balcony are literally blowing in the wind, completely free of charge.
They are.
The only limitation is your ability to arrange them.
And your patience. Because remember, this entire aesthetic theory of the cluster relies on everything we discussed earlier.
Right, the initial observation phase.
You only get the dense, beautiful cluster if you have the psychological discipline to let the first uninvited mystery weeds bloom in the first place. You have to wait for the life cycle. You have to painstakingly harvest the dust-sized seeds.
So the aesthetic victory is the direct downstream result of the initial patience. The discipline to not pull the weed when it first appears, which actually circles right back to how Ang concludes the post. Ang notes that testing this theory of the clustered weeds is, quote, something for exploration in the coming weeks. It's an ongoing dialogue with the balcony.
And I think it's a vital reminder for all of us that horticultural value and maybe aesthetic value across the board is rarely an objective fact written into a plant's DNA.
So true.
Value is often just a matter of arrangement, context, and the observer's willingness to look a little closer at something common.
Which leaves you, our listener, with a fascinating philosophical question to mull over today, building on everything Ang is doing out on that balcony.
It's a big question.
It really is. If Ang's hypothesis holds true, if a dense, deliberately curated cluster of completely ordinary, uninvited chickweeds can visually rival the most vibrant, expensive, delicate ornamental flower on the market,
Yeah.
then does the concept of a quote-unquote showstopper actually exist in nature?
Right. Or is the idea of a showstopper just a shortcut? A way for us to rely on a plant's exotic genetics to do the visual heavy lifting, rather than doing the work as the observer and the architect.
Exactly. Is a weed just a symptom of our own lack of imagination in how we arrange the ordinary? Is definitely something to think about.
Absolutely.
So the next time you find yourself hovering over a potted plant, trowel in hand, ready to rip out that stubborn little green sprout,
Maybe just pause.
yeah, suspend your judgment for a few seconds. You might be looking at the first dot in a pointless masterpiece. Just let it grow.